Hey everyone, welcome for our very first video lecture in Psych 230. This is on Chapter 1, Introduction to Human Development. So the goal of my video lectures is to kind of give you a taste of what we might do in a face-to-face classroom. So the idea would be that you'd have the textbook to read and the slides as well, and then this would kind of be a brief overview of some of the most important content. So they won't be as lengthy as what we would get in a classroom, just kind of a bridge to get the most important stuff. So we'll start with our learning objectives, and then the importance of Chapter 1. What we're going to talk about is human development as a science, so kind of the basics of what it is, and then the research methods. So defining human development, the first thing we have to start with is our definitions, and one of the big parts of developmental psychology is examines how and why people change and remain the same over time. A lot of people think about the change piece, but people often forget that we often remain the same in many ways across our lifespan. So we'll look at both of those components in developmental psych, and then how and why people are unique and similar to each other. So these kids from Harry Potter are unique. You know, they have a lot more money than most regular kids, but they also went through puberty and have issues with friends and parents, just like other kids as well. So they're unique and they're similar. We're all unique and similar to each other. And then some definitions. We've got a multidisciplinary science, so lots of disciplines coming together, and it's based on theories, so kind of ideas about how humans work, and then research studies to test those theories. There are some big issues that come up a lot in developmental psych, so we'll see these throughout the whole course. A big one for developmental psychology right off the bat, nature versus nurture. You probably heard of this idea before, but it's kind of asking, is our heredity the important factor for our growth, or is it our environment where we're born? So we've got this little guy with this basketball, he's posing here now, and then we fast forward 18 years and he's going to college on scholarship. So we'd say, is this nature or nurture? A lot of us would fall, and say, oh, that's definitely nurture because they've posed him already with this basketball. But really, in most cases with these reoccurring issues, it's both. So, he's also, looks like he's got a tall athletic build. So it might just be in his heredity to be good at specific sports. My people are all short and stout. We're not really going to be basketball stars. So it's both. It's nature and nurture. One way we love to tease this apart is with twins. So twin studies will really let us get at how much of things is nature, how much of it's nurture. Sorry for the creepy photo. Some other issues. We've got continuity versus discontinuity. So with this one, what the idea is development a smooth progression? I'm gonna get that light off my back there. Is it a smooth progression, kind of working through, like almost like an escalator, or is it big jumps like steps? And, the same thing with this issue is it's often both. So, my daughter learned language like the escalator. She learned a new word or two every day. My son was more like the steps. He didn't say anything. And then he woke up at 18 months and was like, can I have a Pop-Tart, please, mother? Just totally full sentences. So, it can be, both of these things they come together. As well as our other big issue of universal versus context-specific development. We see both of these in human development as well. So with universal, this is saying that we all receive input or we all have a certain thing happen to us. With context-specific, is saying we only certain groups of people have this influence. So we'll watch a movie in the course called Babies, and this is a picture and a trailer for the movie Babies, but it really shows this idea that sometimes, some parts of development are universal. So for the most part, we all have people who talk to us. But other parts, only certain contexts or cultures get. Like some of us go to formal schooling. Others will learn in different, maybe informal ways from our family or our peers. So that's one way that our context shapes who we are. We'll get to see that a lot in the Babies movie. It's one of my favorite films. So we've got the definitions, we've got the major reoccurring issues that we talk about. Now we have the basic forces in developmental psychology. So we have a biopsychosocial framework, which means we have biological, psychological, and then social forces impacting us at all times. So biological forces are things like our, the way in which we grew in the womb, things like our diet, things that affect us as physiology, on a physiological level. If we were exposed to maybe methamphetamine in the womb, things like that. Our psychological cognitive forces are things like our personality, aspects of who we are, our tendency to thrill seek or not, just different aspects of our psychology, our psyche. And then our sociocultural forces are things that are really interesting to me. We'll get rid of the life cycle right there. But those are my favorite kind of, things I'm most interested in. And that's the way that our society and our culture impacts who we are and how we develop. So for me, whenever I see someone have a large group of these like really framed, nice photographs where everyone's wearing the same thing, and maybe it goes up the staircase, I always assume those people have money. That's just something I assume from my background. I'm like, oh, you all dress the same, and you have these, portraits that are framed, you guys have money. But this is, there's all kinds of socio and cultural forces impacting this family. We talked about the weird people in the video introduction to the course. But what this is saying is most of the studies that we have in psychology as a whole are on weird people. So Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. Tons of our samples come from only 12% of the world's population. So even though we're really interested in sociocultural forces, we don't have a wealth of information as to how people in different cultures live their lives. Wish we did. We're working on that. Life cycle forces. So with this, we have one event that occurs, but it occurs at different times in the person's life cycle and therefore has different effects. So if you're pregnant at 15 versus pregnant at 35, this is going to impact your life differently. So it's the same event, different, impacts. So something developmental psychologists might want to understand is why teenagers use substances. So this would be, just a problem we might see in the real world, and we'd be like, wow, there's a teenager drinking and smoking. I wonder why. So one way we could address that, or how a developmental psychologist would address that, would be to come up with some ideas as to why this might be occurring. Why is this teen engaging in substance use? And then we organize these set of ideas into a theory. Once we have an idea or a theory of why this is occurring, we can go out and actually test our theory, and that's our research. So we make these ideas, and we go out and we actually test them. So you're going to see in your textbook that developmental psychology has a lot of theories. I've posted in some of the charts from our textbook in here. At this stage, you can just kind of read through them briefly. We're going to talk about these theories more as they come up in context. So two of the ones I've highlighted here are Erikson and Piaget. These theorists will talk about with every lifespan unit until it's exhausted. So for Piaget, he doesn't go through all the lifespan units, but we'll talk about these people as we move through from infancy, womb to tomb. Some of these other people will come up as they're relevant. So a lot of behaviorism stuff we end up getting with early childhood development. We'll talk some about that. But each of these theories we'll discuss in context. So for now, you can just kind of read through, and here's some more as well. You can kind of read through these theories. I mentioned that Piaget and Erikson are two huge theorists that we'll talk about. See right here, we've got the stages. This is Piaget. It's stages of cognitive development. As you can see, it goes from birth really until adolescence and beyond. As we hit each stage of the lifespan, we'll talk about what stage of Piaget's cognitive developmental theory are these individuals in. And we'll do the same thing with Erik Erikson. So this is his psychodynamic theory. And this one goes from birth to late life. And each time we open up a new stage and we say, today it's adolescence, we're going to talk, what did Erikson say about adolescence? And so, for now, just kind of read through these things and know we're going to be talking about them. One other approach I wanted to bring up specifically, I think there's two, are things that really impact me as a person. I think about them all the time. So I think it's good for kind of us to mention these. And you might find as we go through the course that some theories suit you better than others. And you're like, oh yeah, I think that really explains people a lot better than these other theories. For me, it's some of these ecological approaches and one of the lifespan approaches. So with this, it's saying that we all have this microsystem. This is specific to parents and a child, but it could be, a couple, it could be, some roommates, or you and your dog, or whomever is in this little system that impacts you the most. Then as we go out, we're all impacted by these broader systems. And so we don't always think of these broader systems as impacting our day-to-day, things like our culture, historical events, or even like where our parents work or government policy. But they do. They all kind of put pressure on or impact this microsystem where we live most of our days. So if you ever have, when school starts, for example, maybe you've had a nice holiday break and you haven't really thinking about school, it starts and it applies pressure, and that pressure then hits that microsystem and makes it change and shift. So I think about this theory all the time when things happen in the broader environment. And this is the other big theory I think about all the time, is this lifespan perspective. That's what my PhD is in. I'm a lifespan developmental psychologist, so this one's near and dear to me. But it really says many factors are going to influence development. We have to know what comes before and where it's likely to end up to understand a person. So we don't get somebody in our clinic and they say, I'm addicted to meth. And we say, oh my goodness, when did you start? And they're like, well, I just woke up one day and was like, today's the day for meth. We don't really see that happening. Or a teenager using substances. Typically, they don't just wake up and say, today's the day. There's a whole bunch that came before that. And then we can also understand from our science that there's a lot of trajectory, or there's a way that trajectory might move in time and space if we follow this person through. So it's really important to kind of understand that this is not a static thing. That brings us into our research. Our research is a big part of who we are as developmental psychologists. So we'll definitely cover this. So when we do research, this is what you're going to be, or what you may be asked to do, through the course, but this kind of designing a study. This is something that psychologists will do all the time. We'll choose an issue and we'll design a study. So we often will actually do the study, so we don't put them in quotation marks, but we just look at something in the world and we'll say, oh my goodness, why are The little girl is often playing with the dolls and the boys playing with the trucks. Why does that happen? Why are these children doing it in reverse? And then we could say, let's go study that. Or, we see this older adult that's in this happy, loving marriage. How did they get there? We can go and study that. So there's so many different things to include. That will be posted in there for you all to look at there. But how do you measure your topic? So this is the important thing. How do we measure our topic? So if we want to study something like, older couple that's been married for a long time, or we can go back to our example of the teen using substances. That's a good one to stick with then. We can do systematic observation. So in this one, naturalistic observation, we just go and we watch their real life. So we just go see what happens. There are some issues with that. And so sometimes if people know you're watching them, they'll change their behavior. That's a big one. So if you go into a party and you say, hello, fellow teenagers, I'm 40 years old and I'm here to study you, just go about your business. Like, they're not really going to go about their business. That's a little odd. It can also be hard to figure out exactly where this is happening, when the behavior occurs. So naturalistic observation, none of these research methods are the be all end all, but they all have their purpose. They all have, reason for using them. So in college, I went out and watched cars run red lights. So naturalistic research I did to help a professor. And so it was, seeing whether or not we needed cameras in certain intersections. So it can be good. A structured observation. So both of these forms are systematic observation because we're observing systematically for a purpose. But a structured observation, you create the situation and you just see if something happens. So in some psychological research, they've had, when we used to have phone booths, they'd put a dime in the phone booth. That way you'd get a free phone call, and they would see if that improved people's mood and their helpfulness after they received that free dime. There are possible issues with this one too, which I'm sure you can think of. One, is that you're not having the real world anymore. You've manipulated the real world in some way. Also, the real world is messy. If you set up some kind of experiment, you're out in public, somebody might get mad and punch you. It's a messy thing. It's not always easy. It's not always efficacious to switch your environment around. So these are all good methods, but all of them have drawbacks. This one you can do more often in a lab. So you give somebody a task to perform. And so this one might be, tell me what these emotions are. That's the task. These are great, because you can have them standardized. You can do them in a lab. You can have somebody come in, you give them $10, they do your emotion recognition task, and then you send them on their way. But it's also hard because this isn't real life. So you might have a hard time understanding what this person in the middle is showing. You might say that's fear, but then the researcher says, no, that's surprise. But you might be really good at it in real life if there's a lot of context clues. So, it's not exactly perfect, not akin to real life, but still has its purpose. This one we've all done before so many times. So I'm sure you've done a self-report. So with this, you go and they ask you, did you like your taco? Yes or no? And then you sign, you circle which one you feel. These are great because they're quick. You can just give them to somebody in the Taco Bell drive-through and they can fill it out and they get a free taco. You can do it. You can ask somebody to fill out 500 questions for you to understand their feelings and their, the way that they think about things. But there's a lot of issues with this too. So one of the biggest ones is people can just straight up lie. So you just want your free taco and you don't want to be in the drive-thru anymore. So you just say the number 5 for everything and then you leave. It's just a lie, or people get halfway through and they give up. Or the way you word the question confuses people. That happens all the time. So you have like a double negative in there, or you just didn't proofread it and then it's confusing and people are like, I don't know. And then you get a bunch of weird junk data. So, it's good, but it's also bad. Physiological measures are really fun. So psychologists will take things like hair. These are blood spot cards. So you get a little finger prick and get blood spots. And we can tell a lot from stuff like this. So with our teenager, if we wanted to understand, are they using substances? We could take a couple inches of their hair and get a profile there, or some of their urine and get a profile there. This definitely has some issues associated with it as well, though. Not always are people going to want to give you their physiological measures. I was in a study with postpartum, so looking at moms after they gave birth, and they wanted some of my hair. Well, my hair was falling out in clumps, so I got really sensitive about it. I didn't want to give them my hair. I did eventually because I wanted the research karma, and I think it's important, but I really didn't want to. And you're going to run into that, where people just, it's they don't want to get stabbed by a little needle to give you the blood, or they're worried about what you're going to do with their data, which is, valid. You have to be conscientious of these things. So, awesome, but still not always perfect. And these are why we have to be so considerate of the methods that we choose, is because if our stuff is not reliable, if we don't get the same, answer every time we do it, or similar answer every time we do it, or if it's not valid, if we're not measuring what we intend to measure, then our research is garbage and nobody should even read it and it doesn't mean anything. So if I'm trying to understand teen drug use, but I get different responses every time as to how much drugs this teen's actually using, or if instead I'm measuring her depression and not her drug use, then this research is not going to be valid. It's not going to be important. We also have to be careful of who we're sampling. So if we want to understand teen drug use across the whole country, it's not going to be good to just go to one high school. We have to think of who do we actually want it to generalize, and then who can we get actually to participate in the study. We can't get every high school or every teen, so we have to instead look for a sample that's good enough, represents the country good enough, or represents our sampling frame good enough that it makes sense. So yeah, our sample should represent our population. All right, now we have some research designs to discuss. And so with this, correlational studies is going to be a lot of the research that you actually see. And with this, it's an association between two variables. So GPA and SAT, or height and shoe size. The problem with this is that, we don't know for sure then if it's a correlational study, if one causes the other. So this graphic shows us that being smart could cause you to have more friends, having more friends could have you be smarter, or it could be that your parents are great and now you're really smart and you have lots of friends. So we don't really know what the causal factor is in a correlational design. These studies, or these links, are really fun because they kind of show some of this issues with correlation and causation. People struggle with this all the time. So you'll hear newspaper articles that say like, if you eat dark chocolate every day, you won't have a heart attack. Well, that's a correlation. That's not a causal factor. So you can't just eat a bunch of dark chocolate and then your heart's great. It's correlation. One doesn't cause the other. So when we want to understand cause and effect, we're looking more at experimental studies. These can be hard though because we have to manipulate our independent variable, and humans are difficult to manipulate. So if I want to understand something like nature versus nurture, I can't take your kid away and give it to another family and then be like, well, let's see if it's their nature or their nurture. We can't do that. I can't bring my teens in and say, okay, you guys do meth and you guys drink alcohol and let's see what happens. Like, you can't do that. So we have to be really careful with cause and effect, and many times then we can't do experimental work, but researchers will do their best to get around that. We have things like quasi-experimental studies where they manipulate some of the variables, but generally though, this is more of the gold standard experimental study. So something like we could do to be kind of quasi-experimental is bring a kid into a lab, show them 10, 30, or 90 minutes of violent TV, and then look at their behavior afterwards. So the kids who watch 10 minutes, are they less violent, less aggressive than those who watch 90? That's something we could do and kind of study that. Longitudinal studies, these are amazing too. This is a gold standard in developmental psychology research. You observe one group over time and you just keep following them. It's excellent data, but it's expensive and a time commitment. So you imagine if you start your research career at 30 and you bring a whole bunch of 25-year-olds, by the time they get to be 80, you are also quite a bit older than they are. You'd be 85 then, I think. It's a long thing. It takes a long time to wait for people to grow up, but the data is amazing. So we often can't do longitudinal work because it is, expensive and a time commitment, and we don't have 60 years of our life. So this way we will take big groups of people, so kids that are 15 to 24 years old, young adults 25 to 34, and then a group of 35 to 44. And we'll go maybe get them at the mall and we'll just say, hey, you come here, fill out this study about drug use. And then we'll compare them all at that single point in time. And we'll be able to say, okay, 15 to 24-year-olds do less drugs than 25 to 34-year-olds who do more drugs than 35 to 44 or whatever. Just making that up. That's not data that I have. But it's just saying we get those different ages, we compare them all at one point in time. So I got them all at the mall today. So in order to make this kind of a stronger study, so these cross-sectional studies are good, they're good research, but they're not as strong as our longitudinal work. And so with this, we get sequential studies, which you don't see a ton of these, but they are really, really interesting. So you go to the mall, you get your 3 groups of people, and you say, please fill out this study about drug use. I'm going to give you some free pizza and maybe $10. And then I'm going to get your contact information, and I'm going to keep asking you about your drug use for the next 20 years. It doesn't have to be some really, really long time span. So that's often what screws people up there. Our longitudinal and our sequential studies, sometimes they only run for 4 months. The one I was in for postpartum only ran, I think, for 6 months. But that was a longitudinal study because they got me at one point in time and followed me. So it doesn't have to be 20 years. These are just amazing when it can be, but short-term longitudinal is still very valid. So then some ways that we'll integrate the findings. So we've talked about, making a theory, we go out, we test the theory, we get our measurement, and then we want to integrate and see what we actually find. One excellent way to do this is through meta-analysis. So if I want to understand something like, should I let my kid play video games? I will look for a meta-analysis. So it'll take all these studies and kind of mush them together mathematically and try to see if that effect that they found if it replicates or if it's strong enough to hold across studies. So if I find one study that says video games are bad, but then 8 studies that say they're fine in moderation, mush them all together, what we're going to find then is in general, they're fine in moderation. That's kind of what the meta-analysis does. So really good stuff when you can find it. And then conducting research ethically. So we're almost done, but ethically, we want to minimize risk. So if you know something's risky to your participants, that's why I couldn't bring a bunch of teens in and give them alcohol. That is not acceptable levels of risk. You want to have informed consent, so you let people know that you may get this drug or you may get a placebo, or I may be watching you and take substances. You have to tell people what you're doing, and you have to avoid lying to them. Sometimes we have a little bit of lying, so just a smidge. I might tell you that this research is looking at how quickly you can solve a puzzle, but really the puzzle I give you doesn't have all the pieces, and I'm actually looking to see how frustrated you get. So that's a little bit of lying, but it's not huge. It's not a giant risky lie. I couldn't come in and tell you I'm giving you sugar for your coffee and then give you like a hard drug. That is not an acceptable level of deception. And then you have to keep the data confidential. Don't go tell everybody what you found. So then we take this is who you can tell. You can tell research, you can communicate the research results in a journal, but you don't want to give any specific information to one person, let them be identified. So we have to group, all of the people together and publish that data. And then hopefully, this is our end, is that results will be implicated into policy. So developmental psychologists have informed things like, who should be able to adopt children? What age should you be able to drive? When should school time start? This one is always a problem because, high schoolers go to school way too early. Developmentally, they have this biological shift where they can't go to sleep super early, and then we're shoving them into the classroom at 6 a.m. And it's harmful, but there's a lot of other factors that go along with that too. So it's hard to change, but we try and get those results into policy as well. So I know this was a very long chapter because it's our theory and it's our science and it's everything, but I hope that this video lecture was helpful, and I look forward to talking to you again with chapter 2.